Yippee-ki-yay, here we are, costs of unemployment. This is clip number 4 in the unemployment series. Exciting stuff. So, costs of unemployment. We'll remember from way back when that when economists talk about the costs of something, very often, depending on their theoretical predispositions, but very often they will be referring to foregone opportunities, and more particularly the net benefits that have been foregone by making some particular choice. When we're talking about the costs of unemployment, we are similarly talking about the foregone net benefits of GDP, gross domestic product, that would have been produced but has not been produced because some resources are not being employed, are lying idle. So usually, as a very rough estimate, we contract that foregone net benefits of GDP that are not being produced. We contract that very often to just the foregone GDP, the foregone output that could have been produced and could have been distributed throughout the society in some way to generate happiness for people. That which has been foregone is the cost of unemployment. If that seems odd or counterintuitive in any way, perhaps think of it in the following way. If you had resources that were lying idle and therefore are producing nothing, but you then set them to work as an alternative. If you set them to work putting them in an office, giving them pens and pencils and providing them a bunch of meaningless tasks which result in nothing being produced by these people, then what has been given up by the society in terms of output by them just sitting at home in a beanbag? Well, the answer would be not much. So we would say the opportunity cost of these people being unemployed, sitting at home in a beanbag, is very low, close to nothing. Why? Because we've given up nothing by them being unemployed. If, on the other hand, when they're gainfully employed, they could have been producing blast furnaces or iron bars or Mars bars or Turkish delights or and so on, then the net benefits of those products for the society as a whole is what has been lost by them sitting in a beanbag. Okay, so bottom line, basically the major cost of unemployment is the foregone net benefits of the GDP that have not been produced because the people are unemployed. However, of course, we don't want to stop there, because we would also note that when people become unemployed, often there are psychological effects which are important. So people sometimes lose confidence. It's not sometimes, they very often seem to lose confidence and maybe, if they're unemployed for long enough, start to lose motivation to work. Furthermore, when people are unemployed for any extended period of time, their skills start to degrade. That is, they're not keeping up to date, they're not utilizing their skills on a regular basis, and so they start to lose the skills slowly but surely. If you don't lose it, you lose it, so to speak. If that's true, then this is something which has been foregone. These are productive capacities which have been foregone, or given up, or lost because of employment. So the capacity to produce in the future diminishes, especially when unemployment among people is of a more long-term nature. When people return to work, then there's going to be the costs of retraining. So these are resources that are going to be devoted to returning people to a skill level and a knowledge level which they previously had but has diminished because they're unemployed. So in a sense, this is a kind of a waste of resources. If they had never been unemployed in the first place, we wouldn't have to waste money on the retraining process. And finally, probably the most serious, at least in personal psychological terms, the most serious kinds of costs are those of unemployment, are those associated with family breakdown, suicide, crime, homelessness, and drug addiction. Not just because in financial terms these require substantial commitments on the part of government, financial commitments on the part of government to try and solve these problems, and therefore a tax burden being imposed on others when though others could have spent that tax income on goods and services for themselves, something like that. Not only that, but the unseen or hidden or difficult to calculate costs that might not be appropriate to try and monetize in some way. So when we talk about, say, suicide, for example, to say, oh well, the cost to the family due to Fred blowing his brains out is $5 million, is somehow inappropriate or wrong in some basic way. We don't have time to go into why that would be the case. Usually has things to do with notions of human dignity and respect, which are not quantifiable in terms of money, and if you attempted to quantify them in terms of money, you somehow destroy it. But that's a bit of a side issue. In any case, we can at least say that these things are costs of unemployment, even if we're not able to measure them in monetary terms. Going on to the issue of the duration of unemployment, it's worth noting that a particular phenomenon, that one of the side effects of unemployment can be an increase in income inequality and wealth inequality. This is because, of course, in a recessions are terrible situations, but they, as a general rule, recessions harm most the most vulnerable who are working. So people who are low skilled will generally be the first people to be laid off in a recession. People who are on high incomes or have substantial wealth very often have means by which they can protect themselves from a downturn. That is, they can protect their standard of living during a downturn. So their material form of life isn't substantially changed, even if economic growth is negative for some period of time. Whereas someone who is on very low income, has low skills, who subsequently becomes unemployed, they have very little means of maintaining their standard of living. Their standard of living is likely to fall. So during a recession, you're likely to see greater disparity in the standard of living between the very wealthy and the poor, the working poor. Furthermore, when the economy starts to recover, it's households that own capital, that is, that own the means by which you can produce goods and services, machinery, factories, and so on, or financial capital, which can be invested in the production of goods and services. These households generally can improve their standard of living when a recovery occurs. However, what if the main thing you own is your ability to work? Turns out that after a recovery, the unemployment rate does decrease. People do go back to work, but the unemployment rate decreases quite slowly, so that people who have been thrown onto the unemployment pile at the height of a recession will slowly but surely, and therefore have had their standard of living substantially harmed, will slowly but surely re-enter the workforce. So the standard of living as a group, for the group, the standard of living will slowly but surely creep upwards again, but nowhere near as quickly as for those who possess capital. I'll just show you some stats to see how this operates. So if we look 1983, we had a recession. This is the unemployment, the blue squiggly line is the unemployment rate. In 1983, there was a recession. You can see the unemployment rate went up over 10%. So a bit before that, 1981, the unemployment rate was down at about 5.8, 5.7%. Okay, the recession hits 1983. It's not as if the year after that, or 2 years after that, the unemployment rate is back down to its original 5.7, 5.8. No, we have to wait another 8 years before the unemployment rate eventually gets close to what it originally was just before the recession hit. Turns out that in 1990, 1991, another recession hit Australia. The unemployment rate jumped up again, hits 9% at the beginning, and then peaks at, no, that'd be about 11-ish percent, 11 and a bit percent. So again, we have a substantial period of time before the unemployment rate climbs back down to its pre-recession level. So we've gone 1991, basically about 9 years, roughly, before it gets back down to its original level. Then from 2000, about 2008, everything's going hunky-dory. The unemployment rate's falling. It falls to a very low level, almost 4.1% roughly here in 2008. But 2008 is also when the global financial crisis occurs, 2007, 2008. Australia starts to experience that after some lag period with this little spike upwards in the unemployment rate, close to 6%, and now, well, we'll have to wait and see where it goes after this, but at the moment it's not going back down to the unemployment rate that existed before the global financial crisis. Okay, now let's talk about the distribution of unemployment. Unemployment, of course, is not evenly spread across regions. We could talk about the distribution of unemployment across states and across local government areas, just to illustrate the point that unemployment isn't evenly spread. When we talk about the unemployment rate being 5% or 6%, it doesn't mean, say, 6% everywhere equally. Its unemployment can be concentrated into certain areas. So here's the unemployment rate for, well, you can't see it here, let me just fix that. Okay, so you can see the unemployment rate is the blue for New South Wales is the blue line, and we can see the purple line is the unemployment rate for Queensland. And you can see they track each other reasonably well, but they're certainly not identical. So up until the global financial crisis hit Australia in unemployment terms, we can see that before then, up until say 2006-ish or 2005, we can see that the unemployment rate for Queensland and New South Wales is quite similar. They bounce around a bit, but they're in the same ballpark. After 2005, 2006, the unemployment rates start to diverge. And we can see that the unemployment rate for Queensland is clearly lower than the unemployment rate for New South Wales. And for 2009, we get the spike in the unemployment rate in Queensland and the spike in the unemployment rate in New South Wales. But the spike in the unemployment rate in Queensland merely brings the unemployment rate for Queensland up to the unemployment rate for New South Wales, at least at the beginning. About a year into the global financial crisis, the unemployment rates for both states merge. And so they're roughly similar. And a bit after that, we can see the unemployment rate for Queensland, for a period anyway, starts to exceed that for New South Wales. Okay. That's just illustrating the point that across states you do get variations in unemployment. It's not the same everywhere. The height of the global financial crisis affecting Australia, we can say that New South Wales was certainly hit much harder than Queensland. Let's look at unemployment at a local government level. So here we'll look at the unemployment rate for 2008 through to 2010. And we'll use it for New South Wales. There's the New South Wales unemployment rate. Again, 2009, this is the spike. Parramatta. We can see for Parramatta it's roughly tracking that for the New South Wales unemployment rate. Penrith, again, quite similar to Parramatta and New South Wales. Let's add my favourite suburb, Auburn. So the Auburn unemployment rate is clearly much higher. In 2010 it almost gets up to 12%, which is very high. So we can say that unemployment, at least for this period that we're looking at, unemployment is more concentrated in Auburn than in other local government areas of the Western Sydney region. Alright, let's have a little quick quiz. When real GDP is at the full employment level, there is zero unemployment, true or false? Well, we know from the previous video that full employment is where involuntary employment equals zero. Involuntary employment was composed of two types of unemployment. There was cyclical unemployment, or Keynesian unemployment, or demand-deficient unemployment. They all mean the same thing. And then there was wage-based unemployment, or classical unemployment. So if these types of involuntary unemployment are zero, then we say the economy is operating at full employment level. But is involuntary unemployment the only kind of unemployment there is? Well, the answer, of course, is no. So if we take total unemployment, there's cyclical unemployment, that's Keynesian unemployment due to recessions. There's classical unemployment due to wages being above the equilibrium level that would clear the labour market. They make up involuntary unemployment. Then there's the other two types. Frictional unemployment, where people are looking for a new job, and structural unemployment, where people lack the requisite skills. These two types of unemployment are called natural unemployment. Now, full employment is where full employment is where involuntary unemployment doesn't exist. It doesn't follow from that there's no unemployment. It just means that these two types of unemployment are in existence. Frictional unemployment can still exist. Structural unemployment can still exist. Frictional unemployment might be 3%. Structural unemployment might be 2%. In which case, the overall unemployment rate is 5%, and there's no involuntary unemployment. So by definition, although the unemployment rate is at 5%, there is still full employment. So, the original statement is false.